The day my parents told me what they generously had for me, I felt the floor shift beneath me, but not in the way I expected. My name is Kendra. I'm 27. I had learned long ago that when my parents call you into the living room with that particular tone, it never bodes well. That careful, measured voice, half pride, half calculation, meant a life-altering announcement was coming. And I could already feel the tension in the air, thick as fog. On the couch, my sister Melissa sat scrolling on her phone, her posture perfect, her expression calm, untouched by any worry. I folded my arms, bracing myself. I knew this wasn't going to be a casual chat. My dad cleared his throat, that low hum of authority that made me instinctively shrink a little inside. He began speaking about fairness, opportunity, and helping both daughters start life on the right path. My mom's smile was tight, forced, like she had rehearsed generosity in front of the mirror that morning. Then came the words I'll never forget. Melissa was receiving a brand new apartment in the city, modern, secure, pristine. Gym, elevator, everything done for her. Her smile grew immediately. She could picture herself there, lights reflecting off the spotless windows. I tried to steady my heartbeat as my mom turned to me. They had something for me too, she said. Hope flickered. For one brief second, I allowed myself to imagine something equal. Maybe this time, recognition. Maybe this time, fairness. Then they handed me the address and the photos. I wish I could describe the shock. The house looked like it had been abandoned for decades, cracked walls, a roof sagging like it was tired of holding itself up, windows broken or missing entirely, weeds taller than I was swallowing the front yard. It wasn't just old, it felt defeated. Even the city seemed to have turned its back. My mom, sensing my hesitation, jumped in. She explained the potential, the charm of practicality, and how this would suit me perfectly because I was responsible, capable, and hands-on. Melissa, she said, needed ready-made perfection. That was the moment the words branded themselves into me, a line echoing in my memory. My parents gave me a dilapidated house and my sister a flawless apartment. I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream, but years of conditioning, being the reasonable daughter, kicked in. I nodded, thanked them, and swallowed the lump of unfairness lodged in my throat. The papers were signed quickly. Legally, the house was mine. Melissa's apartment, meanwhile, was already fully furnished and ready for her. A week later, I moved in. That first night, the ceiling leaked into a bucket I placed on the living room floor. The heater groaned. Every creak of the floor sounded accusatory, like the house itself was judging me. I stood in darkness, surrounded by dust, and whispered to myself, this is still something, a starting point. I took 2 jobs, saving every dollar I could, while nights and weekends were devoted to learning how to repair the house. I watched endless tutorials, borrowed tools, scraped my hands, and slowly started turning despair into progress. Step by step, section by section, the roof was patched, walls cleaned, trash cleared from the yard. Months passed, and then a year. The house began to resemble a home. Not luxurious, but solid, safe, warm, a place that felt earned. I planted a small garden, refinished the floors, even added a tiny sunroom where the broken porch had been. Then the day my parents came to visit, everything changed again. My mom walked through the door, froze, and scanned the house as if she were appraising someone else's work. My dad stood quietly, jaw tight. My mom spoke at last. And in a calm, precise tone that cut deeper than any scream, she said, we're taking this house back. It now belongs to Melissa. You have 48 hours to move out. I stared at her, waiting for a punchline. None came. She spoke about fairness, asset distribution, and how Melissa's apartment was too small compared to this. Logic twisted to serve entitlement. My reminder that the house was legally mine was waved off, as if paperwork were trivial. My dad avoided my gaze. That avoidance stung more than the words. 2 days later, Melissa arrived, carrying boxes, her confidence unshakable. She imagined moving in, claiming the place as hers. Then she stepped inside. Her face drained of color. The smile faded. She realized instantly this wasn't just a house, something unspoken, rooted in the land itself, had changed everything. I didn't say a word. I simply smiled, knowing they hadn't checked what mattered most, the land beneath the house. When my parents handed me the property, I read the details. Every line. The house itself had been written off as worthless, but the land had not been returned. Zoned differently, grandfathered into a rare classification, the property held immense value, something they had overlooked completely. That night, as Melissa unpacked, I quietly reviewed the contract I'd signed months earlier with a developer. Once the house met safety codes, a sale would go through. They wanted the land, not the house. I had played my cards silently, while my parents believed they were reclaiming a failure. And in that moment, as Melissa's confusion grew, I realized everything was about to turn, but they didn't see it coming yet. The empty bucket caught the rain from the ceiling, and I looked outside, letting the storm wash away any doubt. The foundation was mine, and they hadn't even noticed. The next morning, I woke to the sound of birds chirping through a partially open window. The house smelled faintly of mildew, but it no longer felt like a prison. I had spent the past year wrestling with every corner of this place, and for the first time, it felt like mine. But the 48-hour ultimatum from my parents still lingered in my mind, a shadow over the calm. I started by assessing the work that still needed attention. The roof had several weak spots, and the plumbing groaned whenever the water was turned on. Yet, for all its flaws, the house held promise. I ran my hand along the rough wooden banister, feeling the smoothness where I had sanded it down myself. Every mark was a reminder of how far I'd come. Determined not to be bullied by my family's sense of entitlement, I continued my renovations. Days blurred into nights. I reinforced the floors, replaced broken windows, and tackled the peeling paint on the walls. I learned to patch drywall, to mix cement, to repair old wiring. Each challenge taught me patience, resourcefulness, and perseverance. Meanwhile, my parents kept making small, pointed visits. My mom would stroll through, eyes scanning the space with that critical edge, commenting on choices of paint color or furniture placement that didn't even exist yet. My dad stayed mostly silent, as though weighing whether to intervene. Every time they left, I could feel a quiet satisfaction that I was transforming not just the house, but the narrative they had written for me. Melissa, on the other hand, oscillated between curiosity and irritation. She would call, asking questions about when she could move in, or where the living room would go. I answered cautiously, never revealing the details of the developer or the zoning. I had learned that the most powerful advantage is often invisible. Then came the day I received a notice from the developer. The conditional sale was ready to be finalized once all safety codes were met. My heart raced as I realized that every sleepless night and scraped hand had brought me to this tipping point. The house was no longer just a home, it was a ticket to opportunity they had never considered. I decided it was time to confront the legal aspect more directly. I reviewed the zoning certificates, the deed, and the contract I had signed. Everything was in order. The land was mine, legally and irrevocably, and the developer was prepared to honor the contract. I allowed myself a small, private smile. This was the moment where years of underestimation began to pay off. Yet, I didn't let myself become complacent. Each day, I continued fixing, painting, and reinforcing. I learned about permits, inspections, and municipal codes. I talked to contractors discreetly, gathering knowledge and ensuring that when the sale was finalized, no obstacle could arise. Every conversation was a step closer to security and validation. My parents, unaware of the depth of my preparation, kept applying pressure. They tried reasoning, guilt, and even subtle threats. My mom reminded me of family bonds, suggesting that fairness demanded Melissa be given the house. My dad avoided eye contact but occasionally muttered, "It's complicated." Their attempts only strengthened my resolve. One afternoon, I was outside, tending to the small garden I had planted in the backyard. The weeds had been cleared, the soil tilled, and tiny green sprouts peeked through the dirt. It was a quiet, meditative moment. Melissa's name came up again on a call, her voice sharp with expectation. I listened patiently, offering polite responses, while internally, I prepared the next move. The day arrived when I finally had all inspections completed. The house passed every check, each certificate a mark of legitimacy and accomplishment. I called the developer to confirm readiness, and the contract was now active. The weight of anticipation pressed on me, but this time it was a sweet tension, a thrill of victory yet to be revealed. Melissa's arrival that week was dramatic. She walked through the front door with her boxes and confidence fully intact, planning every placement of furniture and decorative choice. Her expression shifted as she noticed the changes, the refinished floors, the sunlight through repaired windows, the small but thriving garden. Her smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. I welcomed her politely, keeping my tone neutral. She scanned the rooms, muttering to herself, and I could see the realization dawning slowly. This wasn't just a patched-up house. It was a structure strengthened by knowledge, effort, and, more importantly, by ownership. She didn't yet understand why it mattered so much. I reminded myself of every night I had spent sanding, patching, and repainting. Every moment of exhaustion and doubt now felt like preparation for this exact encounter. My parents, still hovering nearby, assumed she was impressed or even intimidated, but they had no idea what I had learned about the land beneath the house. I invited her to sit in the small sunroom I had added, a space that had once been a broken porch. The sunlight poured through the glass, casting a golden glow on the fresh paint and polished floors. Melissa sank into a chair, visibly flustered, while I calmly laid out my plans. I spoke slowly, letting every word hang in the air. The house itself was hers by name, but the land, the most valuable part, was legally mine. Her eyes widened. She glanced toward my parents, seeking support or a contradiction. There was none. My mom's lips pressed tightly together, my dad shifted uneasily. For the first time, I felt the shift in power. I wasn't just defending a house. I was asserting my right to what they had overlooked, and they were powerless to stop it. I pulled out the folder I had prepared months ago, the deed, zoning certificates, and developer contract. I placed them on the polished kitchen counter. Silence fell. My parents' expressions changed as they read, comprehension dawning slowly, unease growing. Melissa moved closer, panic replacing confusion. This land, I said calmly, has never been transferred back. It was grandfathered into a special zoning designation, and the developer has already committed to purchasing it. You can't take it away. Shock filled the room. My mom's voice trembled as she asked how much the sale was for. I stated the number clearly, more than the cost of Melissa's apartment, more than they had invested in me or expected to. Melissa started crying, realizing that her expectations had been built on assumptions, not facts. I spoke gently, it was never meant to be hers. But it has always been mine to turn into something valuable. And now, it is. The tension was palpable. They had tried every angle, guilt, anger, negotiation, but their attempts were meaningless. The foundation, the literal ground beneath the house, was mine. The house had been a test, a challenge disguised as punishment. For months, I had been underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed. And now, as the reality settled, I felt a sense of quiet triumph. Not vindictive, but absolute, undeniable. The work, the planning, the patience, it all culminated in a moment they could not reverse. Melissa looked around one last time, realizing fully that her plans were undone. My parents' attempts to reclaim the property were futile. The sale would proceed, and my ownership was unassailable. And in that quiet, victorious moment, I understood a truth that had guided me from the beginning. Sometimes, being given the scraps reveals the foundation no one else notices. The house, once a symbol of disappointment, had become my power. And no one, not my sister, not my parents, could take it from me. The days after that confrontation felt surreal. I walked through the house, noticing things I had long taken for granted, the sunlight through the new windows, the smell of freshly painted walls, even the faint hum of water flowing through the repaired pipes. Everything was functional, polished, and alive. But the tension in the family had shifted, it was quiet, awkward, almost fragile. Melissa avoided eye contact with me, moving her boxes back into the truck she had brought. Her earlier confidence had been replaced by uncertainty. I could see the thoughts racing in her mind, how she had assumed the house would be hers, how her plans had been built on nothing more than expectation. My parents lingered, still grappling with the realization that this house, and more importantly, the land, was now untouchable. My mother tried to muster some authority, speaking carefully about fairness, bonds, and family priorities. My father shifted uncomfortably, his words half-hearted and uncertain. But nothing they said could undo what had been set in motion. I decided to walk them through the house, room by room, showing them every improvement I had made over the past year. The repaired roof, the clean floors, the functional plumbing, the sunroom bathed in golden light, it was undeniable proof of my effort and commitment. They could see it, but it didn't change the fact that the land was legally mine. During the tour, I noticed the subtle ways their expressions betrayed them. My mother's eyes narrowed as she considered the zoning certificate, realizing her earlier assumptions about the property's value were completely wrong. My father's jaw tightened, an almost imperceptible nod acknowledging that I had outmaneuvered them legally and strategically. Melissa remained silent, occasionally glancing at me with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Her dreams of claiming the house had evaporated in moments, replaced by a dawning awareness that she had miscalculated. I felt no gloating satisfaction, only a quiet, firm sense of justice. This was about righting a wrong in a way that was legal, ethical, and undeniable. In the following days, I finalized preparations for the sale. I coordinated with the developer, ensured that all inspections were complete, and double-checked the contracts. Each signature, each document, was a step toward securing what I had rightfully earned. The sense of anticipation was intense, a quiet storm building beneath the surface. I kept communication with my parents and Melissa polite but minimal. Every call from Melissa was met with calm answers that revealed nothing. My parents' attempts at persuasion, offering compromises, suggesting swaps, even trying to appeal to familial loyalty, were ignored. I had learned that patience and preparedness were stronger than any argument. Then the day came when the developer arrived for the final walkthrough. I met them at the gate, showing them the house and the property. Their eyes lingered on the improvements I had made, the structural repairs, the polished floors, the thriving garden, but their interest was in the land itself. I watched them take notes, nod in approval, and confirm that everything was ready for the transaction. Meanwhile, Melissa's presence became more noticeable. She hovered near the doorway, unsure of how to respond, while my parents lingered behind her. Their faces reflected a mixture of frustration, disbelief, and resignation. They had tried every tactic, emotional appeals, comparisons, and subtle pressure, but none could alter the legal reality. As the final contracts were prepared, I gathered my thoughts. This was more than a financial transaction, it was the culmination of a year of effort, resilience, and strategic thinking. The house, once a symbol of disappointment, had become the foundation for a victory they could neither see coming nor reverse. Melissa approached, asking if she could speak to me privately. I nodded, curious to hear what she would say. Her voice was low, hesitant, tinged with frustration. She admitted she had misjudged the situation, that she hadn't realized the true value of the land, and that she had underestimated my commitment. I listened calmly, acknowledging her feelings without apology. This was a lesson, not a confrontation. I explained that while the house had seemed like a punishment, it had been an opportunity, a chance to prove that diligence, patience, and attention to detail could create power where others saw none. My parents remained quiet, their earlier attempts at control replaced by a grudging recognition of reality. My mother asked if there was any way to reverse the sale, offering to compensate me. I shook my head politely, explaining that the process had been transparent, legal, and fair. There was no need for restitution because fairness had already been achieved. As the developer signed the final documents, I felt a sense of closure. The sale was official, the property, including the land, would soon belong to the buyer. The house, which had once seemed like a burden, had become a vehicle for change. Melissa left that day without unpacking further, her plans undone. My parents stopped calling as frequently, perhaps to avoid the discomfort of repeated reminders that their assumptions had been wrong. The house, once a source of anxiety, had become a monument to resilience and foresight. I walked through the empty rooms one last time, letting the sunlight touch the floors I had polished, the walls I had repaired, the garden I had nurtured. The knowledge that I had transformed a dilapidated structure into a place of strength and opportunity was profoundly satisfying. Months later, the funds from the sale allowed me to purchase my own place, entirely on my terms. No comparisons, no favoritism, just autonomy, security, and peace. The lesson was clear: what others overlook can become your greatest advantage if you are willing to see potential where they see flaws. The house had never been a punishment. It had been a test, a challenge disguised as misfortune. And by rising to it, I had proven that resilience, intelligence, and strategic thinking could turn even the most undervalued opportunity into something extraordinary. Looking back, I realized that my parents' oversight, Melissa's assumptions, and the initial disparity in treatment had been the perfect setup. They had handed me what they thought was a liability. I turned it into leverage, into empowerment, into success. And as the dust settled, I felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that sometimes, being underestimated is the first step toward triumph. After the sale, life settled into a quieter rhythm. The house that had once been a symbol of disappointment now existed only in memory, its walls carrying echoes of sweat, determination, and triumph. I walked through the empty property one last time, breathing in the scent of sunlight, fresh paint, and polished wood. Every corner reminded me of the months I had spent transforming it from decay into something of value. Melissa didn't speak to me much after that. Her confidence had been shaken, her assumptions stripped away. I could sense the frustration lingering in her voice during the occasional family call, but I kept my responses measured and polite. There was no need to gloat, the outcome spoke for itself. My parents' calls became rarer, and the subtle pressure they once exerted vanished. They were learning, slowly, that their previous control had evaporated. I reflected on everything that had led me here. The years of being overlooked, being called the reasonable one, and being given scraps had all been preparation. I had learned that patience, strategy, and consistent effort often outweigh immediate recognition or favor. Every hour spent fixing floors, patching walls, and learning legal nuances had compounded into a quiet, undeniable power. Months later, I moved into my own place, purchased entirely with the proceeds from the sale. It was small at first, but entirely mine, no comparisons, no favoritism, no imposed expectations. I felt a sense of freedom that I had never experienced in my parents' household. The apartment was mine on my terms, and for the first time, I had complete control over the environment around me. The experience also shifted how I viewed family dynamics. My parents, despite their love and support in certain ways, had operated under assumptions and biases. They thought they knew what was best, but they failed to see the full picture. I had turned what they considered a punishment into an opportunity, and in doing so, I had demonstrated that intelligence and foresight often outmatch authority when leveraged carefully. I stayed in touch with the developer for a while, sharing my experience and even helping them understand the nuances of the property. They appreciated my diligence, my attention to detail, and my ability to see the hidden value in what others dismissed. It was a gratifying acknowledgement of the work I had done, but more than that, it reinforced the lesson that perseverance and insight are powerful tools. Melissa eventually moved on. She sold the apartment she had received from my parents, and although she didn't speak openly about the events with me, I knew she had learned something important. Our relationship remained cordial but distant. I realized that some lessons are learned through experience, and hers had come through a mix of frustration, disappointment, and reflection. As for my parents, time softened their frustration but never erased it entirely. They eventually acknowledged my success quietly, without fanfare or explicit praise. I understood that they were learning, in their own way, that assumptions, favoritism, and lack of attention to detail can lead to outcomes they hadn't anticipated. My success was not about revenge, it was about validation and strategy, about taking control of what had been given and turning it into something meaningful. Looking back, I could see the full arc of what had happened. I had entered that dilapidated house with nothing but determination and vision. I had learned, grown, and ultimately converted what seemed like misfortune into empowerment. The house had been a challenge disguised as a gift, and I had risen to meet it. I also reflected on the subtle lessons embedded in the experience. Life often presents opportunities disguised as obstacles, tests designed to measure resilience, patience, and ingenuity. Those who see only the surface may miss the deeper potential, while those willing to invest effort and thought can uncover hidden rewards. For me, the house was more than just a property, it was a proving ground. Every repaired window, polished floor, and landscaped garden represented a step toward independence and control. Each legal document, contract, and certificate was a shield against assumptions and entitlement. And through it all, I had discovered that empowerment often comes from taking what others dismiss and transforming it into something of lasting value. In the months that followed, I built a life that reflected my priorities. I chose my own environment, cultivated relationships on my terms, and invested in personal growth. The experience with my parents and Melissa became a story I carried quietly, a reminder that diligence, foresight, and patience often yield outcomes that exceed immediate perception. I also recognized the value of boundaries and strategic thinking. By understanding the rules, the law, and the opportunities beneath the surface, I could protect my achievements and ensure that they could not be undermined by assumptions or favoritism. The house had been a microcosm of life's challenges, a test of resilience, adaptability, and the ability to perceive hidden value. Even the garden, which had once been a small hobby, became a symbol of what could grow when nurtured with care and attention. Each plant, carefully chosen and tended, represented patience, growth, and the rewards of persistent effort. It was a quiet but powerful metaphor for the lessons embedded in the entire experience. Through this journey, I learned that power is often subtle, and success often comes quietly. It is not always about confrontation or proving others wrong, it is about preparation, strategy, and using the resources available wisely. The house, the land, the renovation, it was all preparation for a moment when perception and reality would align, revealing the value hidden in plain sight. Ultimately, what I had achieved went beyond property or money. I had cultivated resilience, insight, and a calm confidence that could not be shaken by expectation or pressure. I understood now that life's most valuable lessons often come disguised as challenges, and that the ability to see and act on hidden opportunities is one of the greatest forms of empowerment. By the time I had fully settled into my own home, I had transformed not only the house but also myself. I carried forward the quiet knowledge that perseverance, intelligence, and careful planning often outweigh immediate judgment or favoritism. The story of the house, my parents, and Melissa became a testament to the power of foresight, effort, and strategic patience. By the time I fully settled into my new place, the weight of the past year had finally lifted. I looked around my apartment, everything chosen and arranged by my own hand, every corner reflecting my decisions. No comparisons, no expectations, no favoritism, just a space that was mine. For the first time, I felt a sense of complete autonomy and peace. The experience with my parents and Melissa had left its mark, but it had also taught me lessons that went far beyond property or inheritance. I realized that life often hands you challenges disguised as setbacks. What seems like a punishment or an unfair situation can become an opportunity if approached with patience, insight, and determination. I stayed in contact with the developer for a while, helping them understand the nuances of the property and sharing my insights from the renovations. They appreciated my thoroughness, my attention to detail, and my ability to recognize the hidden value in what others overlooked. It was a validation not of money, but of skill and vision. Melissa eventually moved on, selling the apartment she had received from my parents. Our relationship became polite but distant, shaped by unspoken lessons. She had learned, albeit through frustration and loss, that assumptions and entitlement are fragile when met with preparation and foresight. I did not resent her. Instead, I recognized that sometimes lessons are learned through experience rather than explanation. My parents, too, had their own reckoning. They called less frequently, and when they did, the tone was cautious, measured. They had to process the reality that their assumptions had been flawed and that my success had been quietly earned, without their direct intervention. I understood their discomfort, and I felt no need to exacerbate it. My victory was not revenge, it was validation and strategic foresight. As I looked back on the journey, I could see the arc clearly. I had entered that old, dilapidated house with little more than determination and a vision. I had labored, learned, and persisted, transforming what others dismissed into a tangible achievement. The house, once a source of anxiety and comparison, had become a crucible of growth and empowerment. Each repaired wall, polished floor, and landscaped garden represented resilience, resourcefulness, and the rewards of patience. Each contract, deed, and zoning certificate symbolized preparation, foresight, and the ability to act strategically. What I had built was not just a home, it was a testament to diligence and insight, a tangible reminder that undervalued opportunities often hold hidden power. Through this experience, I also learned about boundaries, self-reliance, and the importance of discernment. It was not enough to simply accept what was handed to you, one must evaluate, prepare, and act to protect what is valuable. I had done this quietly, consistently, and deliberately. By the time others realized the truth, the foundation of my success was already secure. The garden I cultivated became a personal metaphor. The small plants I nurtured represented growth achieved through patience and care. The house had been the same, a neglected opportunity that, when tended to with effort, revealed its true value. I understood that transformation often requires time, energy, and resilience, but the results can be life-changing. I also reflected on the subtle but powerful lesson about perception. My parents had focused on appearances, the state of the house, the superficial value of the apartment they gave Melissa, but they overlooked the deeper potential, the hidden worth that only effort and understanding could reveal. I had learned to see beyond the obvious, to recognize opportunities that others dismiss, and to act decisively when the moment arrived. In the months that followed, I built a life entirely on my terms. I chose my own environment, cultivated relationships that were supportive and genuine, and invested in personal growth. The experience had instilled in me a quiet confidence that did not rely on external validation, and I carried it forward into every decision I made. Looking back, the house, the family dynamics, and the eventual sale of the land had been a crucible for personal growth. I had turned what seemed like misfortune into a defining moment of empowerment. The initial unfairness, the comparison to my sister, and the attempts at control from my parents had all become catalysts for resilience and insight. I realized that sometimes the greatest opportunities come from situations where others see only obstacles. Being underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed is often the very condition that allows someone to rise above expectations. The house had been a test of patience, skill, and strategic thinking, and it had revealed my capacity to succeed on my own terms. Melissa's apartment was eventually sold, and my parents had to reassess their approach to future decisions. I moved on with my life, carrying the quiet satisfaction of having taken what seemed like scraps and turned them into something invaluable. I did not seek revenge, I simply acted with foresight and diligence, letting the results speak for themselves. In the end, the story of the house became a personal guide. It reminded me that resilience, strategic thinking, and attention to detail are far more powerful than entitlement, favoritism, or superficial judgment. What others overlook, dismiss, or undervalue can become your greatest asset if you are willing to act with patience and insight. The journey had started with frustration, disappointment, and a sense of injustice. But it ended with empowerment, autonomy, and the quiet knowledge that preparation and perseverance often outweigh assumptions and immediate perception. I had proven to myself, and indirectly, to my family, that diligence and strategy create opportunities that cannot be taken away. Even the smallest victories mattered. Each repaired board, each freshly painted wall, each document signed correctly represented a step toward independence and self-reliance. And though Melissa, my parents, and the house itself were all part of the story, the most important achievement was the growth I had cultivated within myself. Ultimately, the experience became a lesson I carried forward. Life may present unfair circumstances, but the way we respond defines our outcome. Opportunities often hide in the least promising places, and those who are patient, resourceful, and willing to act thoughtfully can transform perceived disadvantages into undeniable success. The house, once a burden, had been my proving ground. The land beneath it, once overlooked, had become my foundation for independence and empowerment. And through it all, I learned that resilience, foresight, and effort are far more enduring than favoritism, assumptions, or temporary authority. I settled into my new home, peaceful and confident, knowing that the lessons of the past had prepared me for whatever challenges lay ahead. Life had tested me, underestimated me, and dismissed me, but I had turned that challenge into opportunity, and that opportunity into a life I could call entirely my own. Sometimes, the things others see as worthless or inconvenient are exactly what can shape your greatest success. And that realization, more than anything, changed the course of my life forever.